So Bethesda hasn't had the best track record recently with Fallout 76, Elder Scrolls Blades, Doom Eternal receiving the nouveau anti-cheat, which eventually got taken out. But a lot of people praise their past games such as Skyrim, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Fallout 3, with a lot of people going out of the way to say these are some of the best games of all time. I'm going to look at one of Bethesda's gems from the past today, Fallout 4. It's a game I've wanted to play for a very long time, and it's something that I've wanted to experience, but never came around to it until recently. With Bethesda's past games being so adored, will I, a person who's never finished a Bethesda developed game, enjoy it as much as those people? Well, welcome to my review of Fallout 4 in 2020. Now, I'm going to start with something that's pretty key to this game because it's pretty much 50% of it, and that's gunplay. Gunplay is really bad in this game, especially in comparison to other games that came out in 2015. Now, whilst I know this isn't a first-person shooter or isn't a game that's focused on gunplay and more on world building and story, which we'll get on to later, it still should have been a lot better for what it was. VATs are very dependent in this game. If you don't use the VATs, you're going to struggle a bit more than most other people. It is a huge improvement, however, from Fallout 3 in New Vegas, which I went back to play the first hour of after finishing this. But other than that, gunplay, I hope for the next Fallout game, whatever it will be a huge improvement from this and for 76. The story premise is honestly quite interesting personally to me. It's a man out of time story who's looking for his son and discovering a new world whilst making new friends. It's very interesting. I like that kind of story. It interests me. You got my attention, Toll. 90% of the characters, though, are very one-dimensional. Only interesting characters at time of play, which was, I think, around 8 hours in, was Nick Valentine, Desdemona, and Piper. And I still stand by that. The characters are pretty one-dimensional. They don't have much emotion to them. They're kind of boring in a way. I found these characters interesting because they felt like they had a true cause, except from being the generic rebel soldier guy or being the generic Terminator looking guy. Piper's stories about her sister and what's happening in Diamond City were very interesting to me. Nicky V is one of the boys. I love him. He is honestly a fantastic character in my eyes. He's funny, witty. What he has to say to you is really interesting as well. And Desdemona, just for being that kind of essentially like a Princess Leia of this game in a way. Even though it's the biggest map Bethesda has made for a single player Fallout game, with Fallout 3 being 8.4 kilometers, Fallout New Vegas being 8.5, and this game coming in at 9.7, it just doesn't feel nice to play in. It's pretty to look at. It's not a nightmare to traverse, but not great either. But it just doesn't have that thing that worlds such as The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, and God of War have. They all work differently, and for some reason Fallout 4, I just didn't get that feeling from them. The mission design is actually pretty good in this game. Many missions have you get to a place, and then at the same time give you a small side mission to tell you a story about the certain place where you are at. I really enjoyed this, especially at the Cambridge Polymer Labs, when you had to get, I'm pretty sure it was like a plutonium, I can't remember exactly, but I just remember really loving that area. I really loved doing the puzzles in there and going through that to then carry on with the rest of the story. I really did enjoy that. Dialogue and VO is just nowhere near on par with any other game in the series. I only played 20 minutes of New Vegas, and I listened to every word that Trudy had to tell me about the world and what is going on. Whereas the dialogue in Fallout 4 is very basic and feels very streamlined. The VO makes characters like Preston, who should be great in theory, very boring and just not enjoyable to listen to. A lot of the voice actors sounded very bored reading the script, with the exclusion of Piper. The story feels very straightforward, which isn't a bad thing. Two of the most acclaimed games of all time have very basic stories, but this especially feels very basic in comparison to those. Again, it feels streamlined. I appreciate with Sean being the father and being the head of the institute, But even after that, it feels like it hits the ground. You either join the Institute or not. One thing that I really like about this game is the factions. You can either be a dick and join the Brotherhood and Institute, you can be one of the people and join the Railroad and Minutemen. I decided to join the Railroad, Minutemen, and the Institute, hoping that further down the line I could infiltrate them as a member of the Railroad. One thing I have to say, Diamond City Radio is fantastic. The intervals are written so goddamn well, it's funny, ironic, and it's amazing to listen to whilst travelling through the wasteland of Fallout 4. Performance was questionable. Now, I don't have a bad PC per se. I was playing on a Ryzen 7 1700 with an RTX 2070 1080p medium settings, and my game would occasionally drop down to 35 FPS in certain situations. Thankfully for the modding community, on PC I was able to get a mod which optimized textures and compressed the file sizes. This is because vanilla textures come out at a whopping 2480 by 2480 for ground textures, the same for plant textures, and then 4096 by 2048 for tree textures. This game's side missions are actually fun. Just before starting this game, I finished Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where the mission design for every side quest was the same. Go here, talk to this person, kill a few things, come back, the end. It was very tedious and just not enjoyable. I've been wanting to complete one of the quest lines in the game, but I need to level up, which means I need to do more side missions in the game, which I just can't be bothered for. Whereas this game's side missions all vary. Whilst yes, there are certain side missions which are very similar and are very much go here, kill this, come back, especially the settlement ones, they're actually somewhat challenging and they actually have a purpose in this world. They give you more settlements to join to the Minutemen. Power armor is truly a wonderful thing. Now, the first 12 hours of the game I predominantly spent with the power armor. There are a few locations close to Vault 111 which allow you to get fusion cores pretty easily. You can start the game off with about 4 fusion cores. After you get it, and it makes the start of the game very simple because you just feel like the Terminator. It was a very poor choice to give the player something so strong at the beginning. It felt like Bethesda just wanted to have that there, so they were like, here, have it in the first 30 minutes. After that, when I started recording some gameplay, I stopped using the power armor because I started to run out of cores. So I decided to just leave it behind and see how well I can do. Well, let me tell you, it definitely made me play with more thought. For example, there is a quest where you have to go to an area called Libertaria, and it's essentially Raid of Venice. Really cool and interesting location. But at the main area, there is an NPC which constantly fires mini nukes at you. Now, in the power armor, I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. Just got to stim pack up and then just get to the main ship. No worries. But then I went back because it was the closest fast travel spot for a different mission, and I didn't have the power armor. I forgot that he was there. I didn't think he would respawn, but he did. So I'm just killing raiders, getting new, and then I just hear that whistle and just tail between my legs, sprint out of there to get to safety. One thing that I do really like about this world is that it reacts to things. You complete a quest and the NPCs talk about it as if it's a folktale. For example, Piper interviews you about your time on ice and what happened subsequently after that. And when I returned to Diamond City, a guard instantly noticed me and said, huh, so you're the 200-year-old. It felt really cool and it felt authentic. The Minutemen side missions are the most simple but end up becoming the most important as they help you with certain missions in the future, e.g. when if you decide to leave the Institute, you then have to defend the castle from them. Speaking about leaving the Institute, before this decision you raid Bunker Hill with a Corsair where, if you told the Railroad about it beforehand, you can either turn on the Corsair and you can help the Sims back to the Institute. I decided to turn on the Corsair to help the Railroad and get against the Institute. After that, you meet up with Father on the roof of the CIT ruins. This is where you decide to stay undercover at the Institute or leave them. I decided to leave, and the Father completely turns against you, and you lose the ability to enter the Institute. I felt like I actually impacted the entire world at this point. I thought to myself, I need to get every settlement and make sure they join the Minutemen so that we can attack the Institute when we need to, so we have a better chance to win. Graphics-wise, this game is it's okay. But again, I'll be comparing this game a lot to The Witcher 3 because that's what it was running up against in Game of the Year contention. That game looks amazing, it's just truly stunning. Fallout 4 looks like a 2012 game and it was released in 2015. As well as that, optimization of this game was pretty poor. Here, when I was in Boston, I could turn 180 degrees and lose around 50 to 60 FPS. Now, I just had no clue why this was, but then I looked at the map and I noticed that if I looked one way, I'd be looking into the center, and then at one point, I'd be looking at Bunker Hill, instead of downscaling them and prioritizing them textures near me. Okay, bugs. So it's Bethesda. We all know their reputation with buggy releases without even having to mention Fallout 76. It's still quite a buggy game. I didn't play with the unofficial patch, but there were slight issues where like these little red lights that would show up on the ground. Nearing the end, the AI would freak out, like here at the end where these raiders were just jumping off this bridge and I was just casually getting to get loot for free. AI constantly walking into walls. Sometimes the companion would just lay on the ground and stay there, and then I would need to shoot them. So then when they downed, I would need to stim pack them. Not a huge issue, but just really annoying. The companion feature was a nice inclusion, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed playing with Nikki V at the start and played with Piper for the rest of the game. I got to the highest affinity just before the game ended with Piper, because she's a waifu. But with jokes aside, I enjoyed learning her problems, her issues with her sister, and then how she was realistically just made an outcast by Diamond City. I felt connected to her as a character. It's also pretty helpful to have these companions on your side. The length of the main story was pretty disappointing, I can't lie. The game isn't bad, it's just really underwhelming. I hit the button at 16 hours and 30 minutes. Now, am I disappointed that it only took me 16 hours to finish the main story? Yes. Now, I know a lot of Fallout players will tell me that this isn't about completing the main story, it's about the side quest, the completionist of the world. Now, whilst I can agree on that level, because that is where a lot of the gameplay comes from, I've never felt like I really needed to grind out side missions to get specific perks or rank up. With the XP from the nuclear option, I finished the game at level 27. Now you can tell me if I played enough or not. I felt like I definitely played enough of that game. Again, the game isn't bad, it's just not great. This game went up against The Witcher 3 in the 2015 Game Awards, and people expected it to win. This game is nowhere near on the level of The Witcher 3. That game has a fantastic 50-hour story with brilliant writing, great RPG mechanics, perks and leveling that makes you feel rewarded. Fallout 4 feels like a shell of what an RPG is meant to be. Good writing, but not great. Leveling feels good, but in a way that I felt like, oh, finally I can put on the next perk. Quick note, I didn't understand the perks properly up until about the 8th hour. I thought that I needed to max out the base perks to get the int 1 perks, for example, but then noticed a lot of stuff unlocked and then just got the stuff I really needed. It is a masterpiece level good, it's very good, but I feel I understand a lot of people's gripes with this game and with the streamlining a lot of Fallout fans felt. Overall, this game isn't bad, it's just pretty disappointing. I hope that the next Bethesda title truly lives up to the hype that it's had over the past 8 years.